I started writing the thesis, the uppsats, we began working with this, which was for the government, the report. And the thing was, I wrote up there that methodology was the key issue here. We were a group of 3 people, I have their names here, who put together this report. Actually, I'm the author and the researcher, but we had a female field assistant and a technician who helped us with the statistics and whatnot, data gathering. So we would meet about twice a week to discuss how we would go about getting all the data for this report. There was a big issue that we discussed was gender balance. What do we look for? What kind of questions do we pause, and how do we go about getting this information? Some of the issues that we had taken up, problems that have come up in the past, is an example of earlier research and other reports related to the same subject, because we look at them and go over them just to see what has been touched already. And one of those reports had only 5 informants. And those 5 informants happened to be Romani women activists. So they kind of had a goal, so to speak. And in the report, everything that was presented was based on their own experience. And because it was only 5 Romani women, right, what happened was they became the representative voice, so to speak, for the Romani women in all of Europe. The problem with this was that one woman, for example, said, "My father beat my mother," as an example. And of course, this is something, is a problem within Romani gender equality, or is it a social problem? You see what I'm getting at? See, that was the problem that we had there, was how do we, gather as much data as possible, and what kind of questions do we need to pause? So that this way we can reflect something, a pattern that's more common, that's not something that's very individual, right? So what we were looking for was something that was very quantitative, okay? And the first step that we had taken is that we have a Romani social network called Romsknet. We have about 1,500 members there. I think about 80% live in Sweden. And so the first thing was to start discussions on what is gender balance, Jämställdighet. At the start, a lot of people actually asked, what is Jämställdighet, right? When we put the question out there ourselves, they would return with the same question. What is it? And so one would start explaining, well, it's such that, we all have the same rights as human beings, whether we're women, men, so on and so forth. And then people just started discussing this area, saying what kind of problems they come across as women, what kind of problems they come across as men. And then we took this information and then created a survey, an online survey. And we had, I think, 31 questions. And these 31 questions, we had about 800 people participate, 800 Roma from various groups. And I'm going to go directly to the results from the survey, so I can show you what happened, what kind of results we got. I'm actually taking this from the uppsats, the report itself. First of all, as you can see, it's just basic questions here. Birth date, name, so on and so forth, male, female. But then also, we have here the groups. And so we have like kind of a representation from the various Romani groups to see how they responded to the questions that come. It was also important for us to see where these various people lived. And this is the statistics we got for this. Now, there was a reason that we wanted to know where people lived, instead of just saying Stockholm, Malmö, Göteborg, and so on and so forth. We wanted to actually get like areas within Stockholm. So we got here Botkyrka, Stockholm Haninge, Stockholm Huddinge, Stockholm Sollentuna. There's a reason for this. Okay, we didn't want to end up with a situation where people were going to assume that maybe, say, people, say, in, let's say in Rinkeby, Bromma living in Rinkeby, because of the social problems that exist there, that maybe the education levels are lower or whatnot. We wanted to see if these kind of patterns were going to be real, if geography was going to affect the way people responded to the questions, right? And the thing was, actually, there really wasn't a difference. It didn't make a difference if a Romani person lived in the center of Stockholm, they lived in Lidingö, or they lived in Rinkeby. There was really no difference in the way people responded to the questions. And this was very important because, as later I will discuss some of the results, you will see how this played a role. It was also very vital to us to know if people have children, if they live in Sweden, to see these different aspects at how people would answer the following questions. And that was this situation here. Who do the children live with? You and your partner, your former partner, shared custody, so on and so forth. And the situation actually there was that we ended up seeing that commonly the children live with the mothers. It was very typical. It was very rare that the children lived with men in separated marriages, right? And then we looked at the level of education here. Most people, as you can see here, only completed basic education. They didn't go on to high school and university or trade school. The majority, 40%, said that they didn't complete basic education pretty much. But then what we have here is, what we're comparing here are the results, right? Because then we're looking at the profession as well. Most of the people were unemployed here. We have the same color here because it's the same issue. We just wanted to see, when we filter, how many people answer differently, that they think differently about this problem. So the majority were unemployed, right? But there were some that owned their own companies, a very small percentage, right? And then we had some that had a profession, again, a very small percentage, right? So this is the situation of, the way 800 people responded. 800 people responded to the survey. And then we wanted to look at like the actual social status of, as far as income is concerned. And again, we can see here that the majority make under 8,000 crowns a month. Only 10% made over 20,000. And we kind of looked back at both and filtered through this to see what was going on. And what was going on was that it was in situations where people were, say, they were retired, it would be a whole family household income that they were basing this upon. And this is when we started to get into these more concrete questions, right?